So the legend that is Roger Linn has posted a written reaction to Behringer's clone of his Linn drum machine, and let's just say that he's not impressed. So let's see what he had to say about it, and at the end of the video we're gonna briefly revisit his beef with Akai as well. So most of you probably know who Roger Linn is. He's a legendary instrument designer and creator, and he's the guy who invented the MPC. It doesn't get any bigger and more significant than that, as he's pretty much enabled everything we do nowadays, even if we don't use an actual MPC. So in the early 80s, before working with Akai on the MPC, he released another legendary drum machine under his own brand called the Linn drum, which is all over the 80s most famous records. Fast forward to 2024 and Behringer have released a clone of the Linn drum called LM drum. And just to be clear, my intention isn't to bash on Behringer, I just found Roger's reaction full of super interesting points, so let's go through them. Uli Behringer kindly sent me an LM drum in August of 2024, giving me a chance to try it out. It is clearly intended to evoke my 1982 Linn drum machine, borrowing its visual style, control layout, colors and logo style, as well as copying its sounds and those of my LM1 and Linn 9000 drum machines. I took it apart and it even copies much of my Linn drum sound generation circuit, even my bad ideas like the inability to tune any drums except the snare, toms and congas. I mean, that's kind of funny, I guess they stayed a bit too true to the original. It's worth noting that Uli never asked my permission to either copy my visual design or my drum sounds, though in 2020 he did kindly invite me to collaborate on a future drum machine, and I respectfully declined because of concern about Behringer's past business ethics and legal practices. So Roger is staying classy and respectful as always, but he doesn't hide his feelings about it. How do I feel about the LM drum? My feelings are mixed. On the one hand, it's not unusual for companies to borrow ideas from older products in order to inspire a new and innovative design, which I've done in the past. Plus, my old drum sounds are all over the web, controlling copying is difficult and I don't enjoy legal stuff, so I've generally ignored the issue so far. Also, the value in those old sounds is probably due more to Art Wood, the drummer who played the sounds and my friend for many years, and to artists like Prince and Michael Jackson and others who made those sounds famous in their hits. Finally, I must admit that I've never cared much about the past because I find the future far more exciting. Now that's kind of fascinating that even after all these years he still carries the spirit of futurism, which kind of reaffirms the reputation he has for being a true innovator. And indeed we can see it in his contemporary work such as the Linnstrument. And he goes on. On the other hand, even if we discount the copying of the visual design, logo style and sound circuit of Linn drum, the LM drum copies my sound. So I would have preferred for Uli to ask my permission. Even if he thinks it's legal, I question whether it's ethical. Well, of course it's not ethical, but Behringer are just the latest company to use these sounds, so it seems the practice is accepted in the industry. But his comments get even more interesting. So he says, I find it interesting that the LM drum is being sold in the US for only $3.99. Having taken it apart and seeing how complex the copied old circuitry was to reproduce, I doubt Behringer is making any money from it. I suspect that they originally intended to sell it for much more, then discovered that while many people may say they want a Linn drum clone, few are willing to pay more than a low price for it. And so this reaffirms people's suspicions that Behringer isn't making a profit, at least on some of their synth clones. Because contrary to what some people think, these clones are really good in terms of build and sound quality, even if they are not exactly on the level of something like an actual Moog or a Prophet. And he also mentions the software emulation by GeForce, which was funnily released on the exact same day as Behringer's hardware clone. Unlike Behringer, GeForce did say they wouldn't release the product if I objected, but they seemed like good people, so I turned a blind eye. They also offered to pay me an insignificant royalty for my association with the product and perhaps to use the Linn drum name. But I declined because of the low compensation and because I thought it was misleading to call a product a Linn drum that wasn't a drum machine, but rather only played my copied drum sounds. And he finishes with this paragraph. One last comment. What's the big deal about nostalgia? I can understand that some people value analog synthesis, though I find the many types of innovative software synthesis created in recent decades to be far more capable, versatile, and interesting. But even if people value vintage analog synths, why vintage digital drum machines? I ask this because an old beat is no different than a new beat. And when someone like him says this, we have to pay attention. He has also said many times that there isn't anything special about the legendary MPC swing, but people still repeat the mantra of how unrepeatable that swing is and that the newer machines can't do it as well as the classic MPCs, even though the guy who invented it says otherwise. But definitely share your thoughts about this down in the comments. I'm really eager to hear from you, and I read all comments and I do my best to reply to most of them. But Roger Linn had an interesting situation with Akai back in the day as well. The company went bankrupt in the early 2000s and was bought by Jack O'Donnell, who owned Newmark back then and now owns multiple high-profile music tech brands under the umbrella of InMusic.
The Akai company had some problems and they were bought by the American company Newmark. And unfortunately, the head of that company is a real bastard named Jack O'Donnell, who immediately stopped my royalties on this. And I tried to contact him, and he had a secretary give me lies that he was out of the country and couldn't be reached and things like that. And then he had his lawyers sent me threatening letters, when in fact he was the one who was stopping my payments. And it's basically lawyer bullshit where they try to intimidate you. And it worked. I basically didn't want that sort of energy in my life, so I just backed off. But that's Newmark, Jack O'Donnell of Newmark. So remember that every time you buy a Newmark product. I think he actually bought a Alesis as well in a fire sale, but I'm not sure. But if you look at the address of the companies, they're all the same, and then you can find out that way. But I know he's got Newmark. So anyway, Jack, you're a bastard.
Fascinating stuff. But these days, it seems him and Akai have squashed the beef. They recently sent him an MPC live and he was actually quite impressed with it. And his reaction on a video that he published on his channel was very positive. So even if I'm not an MPC user, I use Ableton Live, Push, Move, and Native Instruments Machine. All these tools are what they are because of Roger Linn's genius and innovative thinking. So what can I say? Thank you, Roger, for everything you've done for us, and thank you to everyone who watched the video. If you found it enjoyable, I'd appreciate if you hit the like button, subscribe if you are new here, and I will catch you later.